everyone, and welcome back to another episode of ClueCon Weekly. I'm your host, John Gray, and today I am honored to introduce Kevin Griffin. Kevin is the CTO of Shows on Sale. He's also deep in a lot of various projects in the .NET Foundation, as well as a local legend in Microsoft Azure as well. But Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure, John. Thanks.
So today we're going to talk about databases, some silly mistakes that we make as tech guys. But if you give the audience just a little background of how you got into this and what it is that you're working on these days.
Sure. So my day-to-day is I'm a consultant. I've been working with small businesses, medium-sized businesses, Fortune 500 companies for on the better part of 20 years. Like I've been doing this for a long time. And when you start getting up into the senior level ranks as a developer, as an architect, as a just a technologist, there becomes this expectation that you know what you're talking about all the time. And if you go into a situation, you're just supposed to always have the answer. And
Definitely.
a lot of folks just fake it, like fake it till you make it. And you receive some information, you go off and you Google, or in this point, you like chat GPT, different questions that you have, and you try to form a solution in your head. One of the things that I deal with a lot is I do a lot of business development in databases, and I'll start the conversation just saying, like, I'm not a DBA. Like I don't live and breathe databases. I use them in a purely functional way to achieve my goals. And I've been working professionally with relational databases for probably 15, 16 out of the 20 years I've been doing this. And I've learned so much, and I've made so many silly mistakes in hindsight that I kind of wrote them all down. And I did this conference presentation last year for the first time, and I called the dumb mistakes I've made with relational databases. And I went into it thinking no one's going to come to this. Like, this is not going to be a big deal. I packed the room. Like, it was, I premiered it at the Kansas City Developer Conference, and I thought I was going to have 10 people in the room, and ended up filling the 150 or so that fit in the room. And then there were people spilling out into the hallway. Like, people resonated with the topic, and I think resonated in a couple different aspects. First, you're working with things like databases. You can't know everything unless you're living and breathing it every single day. And people love when you just admit that you make mistakes. I've gone into this talk just saying, here's silly things I've learned. And I think that's how we become senior level developers and architects and whatnot, is that we make these mistakes and we learn from the mistakes. And you just have a better understanding of how everything works all around. But that talk was packed, and I've since done it a couple more times at different events and user groups around the country. And every time I've done it, it's been the same response, that people say, I'm really glad someone's talking about this. Like, I've learned a lot. And I think the best experience out of it was I kind of get to the end of the talk and I say, all right, this is a safe space. What have you done? And like, people will go around and say, I did this, I learned this lesson, I made this mistake, I did something else. And it's never easy, like textbook stuff. It's always really weird niche issues that you only run into if you're doing work in production. So it's been a fascinating talk to do, and I'm actually doing it again here in a week or two in Washington, D.C. So it's timely that we're having this chat, because this is somewhat fresh on my mind.
No, you touched on a lot of different amazing topics, but one thing that really resonated, just being vulnerable in the tech world, where we often too much have like big egos, needing to be the smartest person, needing to be right, and always finding out your worth based on how much you know. And, you can't know everything. And the more you know you don't know, if anything at all. So as I go on, I find myself, I'm more incorrect far more often than I'm correct. I just default that I'm probably wrong on this, just because, you do just get exposed to such different varying topics. But on relational databases, you said you had a list of kind of some of these different ones. What were some of the most resonating mistakes that you had? Did you find that a lot of people kind of had similar ones or adjacently related? How did that kind of resonate with
Yeah.
the audience?
So I have a list I go through. Some of the big ones. Um, I'm what you would call a formally trained computer scientist. I went to the
Hmm.
school, I got the computer science degree, and that doesn't mean lick, right? It's I got a piece of paper.
Yep.
But part of that process, when you learn about databases, you learn about the innards of a relational database, and they teach you the math. Like it's called relational algebra. It's how databases do the thing that they do, and it's
Oh yeah.
all really it's super boring to most people, uh, including me. It's super boring. But one of the big things that they teach you when you're dealing with relational databases is this concept of normalization. And normalization is where you take a big data set and you remove um, fields and stuff that would repeat themselves and you put them into separate tables. And the end goal is that you have a table that is normalized. And a normalized table doesn't have any repetitive fields inside of it. So a good example might be is if you were building an e-commerce app, your customers and their addresses are in different tables. And then if you have a customer orders table, that references the customers and references the addresses. So
Hmm.
you're not putting address information all over the place. And there was a time, like back in the 1970s, 1980s, where that was a really good idea just because disk space was so limited. And nowadays, we have all the hard drive space in the world. Like I have terabytes and terabytes of disk space just here at my command, not including the petabytes worth of data I have up in the cloud. Um,
Yeah.
so one of the big lessons I learned was, hey, I might be normalizing a little too much. So we've learned just in a lot of our projects, we've been denormalizing our tables where we've been perfectly okay just repeating ourselves in a database and making up a little bit of performance in the long run because we're not having to do multiple joins at different tables
Hmm.
within production. But someone coming in fresh to relational databases, they hear this term normalization, and depending on what book you read, they'll shove down your throat. You should be first normal form, second normal form, third normal form normalization,
Yeah. Oh,
and you're like,
jeez. I
and
know. I
there's
remember that.
go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was just saying I remember that from the college classes as well, writing that down on a piece of paper
Yeah,
of the different orders on those tables.
there's very much an architectural reason to do that, and but one of the things we've learned is we have over normalized a lot of our systems and our lives were just easier when we denormalized. So
Hmm.
that was one of the big lessons I brought to the table was, you don't necessarily have to normalize everything. Um, and if there's an architectural reason to do it, you should totally do it. But in a lot of cases, you don't need to. Um,
Yeah,
that was one of the big lessons was to not don't do unnecessary normalization in your databases.
definitely. No, and as you kind of introduce different services on top of a different application or a project, you can definitely find yourself in quite a maze of being like, oh man, I need birthday, but birthday is in this table to get this field. And next thing you know, you're just stacking on top of stacking on top of stacking. Just
Yep.
all these tables with all these different relationships. And, in order to just get a simple field or just kind of get that information out, you ended up totally shooting yourself in the foot kind of quite a bit. And I see that all the time in a lot of just companies that we are working with at SignalWire, where they'll introduce other services and just start stacking on top of each other, but
Yeah.
it's like a house of cards that's just a leaning tower of pizza that is just eventually going to end up cracking and tipping over. But it was interesting for you to say that you're starting to work on denormalizing some of this data. And relational databases have been around for like 50 years or so, at least like the general concept or philosophy of that. Do you feel as though that trend is something that is like relatively recent or new, or do you feel as though that has been kind of coming up throughout the entire life cycle of relational databases and just kind of sorting out your data? Or what trends have you kind of seen throughout this time?
Yeah, for relational databases, so much of the original design of relational database was around how do you store more data onto a hard drive when you have limited hard drive space.
Hmm.
So things like normalization really made sense because you didn't want to repeat yourself because every little byte on your disk mattered. Um, and like I said, nowadays that's not really necessarily an issue. So why would I take the extra couple milliseconds or seconds, depending on your query, to do a join to a table when I could just have the data sitting there ready to go?
Hmm.
Um, so I think as our hard drives have gotten bigger, our databases have gotten better, our compression algorithms have gotten better. The the need to do this sort of normalization stuff is going away. There's still legitimate reasons to do it,
Yeah.
in a variety of applications. But, it's one of those things you don't have to do it. If you just wanna have a field in your orders table that has the address in it, that's fine. Just go ahead and do it. It's
Hmm.
easier to update, to keep track, to query that data. Um, it kinda leads on to more of the performance mistake stuff that we made was we were doing all this normalization. Now we were having to pull all this data back together to get the result that we needed in our application. And we were looking at execution plans and seeing, oh, well, we have to do the join to this, but in order to do the join, we have to optimize that table in a certain way. And it was so much effort. Not
Yeah.
enough cost savings for the effort that it was taking. So it was lower effort, better performance to not do any of that work.
Yeah. So on just different projects that you have seen or been a part of. We talk about dumb mistakes. What is like your kryptonite story that still haunts you? Or what's like a cool customer case that you feel as though kept you up at 3 a.m. and you're bashing your head across the computer screen? But what would you say would be like your biggest piece of advice to save someone from out of those, or what's just like an interesting story of being a silly techie guy and learning from your mistakes there?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. I don't think I really have the big kryptonite story. I've worked on a lot of projects.
Hmm.
And a lot of the work I do is coming in and, for lack of a better term, saving a project. I do a lot of performance oriented work. I've seen a lot of people make mistakes in production. I've made a lot of mistakes in production, but there's nothing I've seen that's ever been particularly crippling. Um,
Yeah.
I Yeah, I wasn't particularly ready for that question.
No
Um,
worries.
yeah,
On the
it's
flip side, what's like at least a cool success story of
yeah,
where you may have come into a project a little bit late, as every project, it's like, all right, what's your timeline? Last week,
yeah.
and you're like, cool, well, I just got here today, so let's get it done. What's like a fun success story that
Yeah.
you feel kind of proud of, or what kind of architecture tech systems did you use in order to solve that?
Well, one of my favorite success stories, I have a client, they're a nonprofit in Ohio called the National Institute of Public Safety Technology, and, they had an app called LiveCAD. LiveCAD is a really cool application where they aggregate 911 data for at the moment it's Southern Ohio. And so when I say aggregate, is they're taking data about calls from various 911 agencies, and really only makes sense to a U.S. audience, probably, but we have a lot of land in the U.S. that is spread out. So if you were to call 911, which is emergency services, you get a dispatcher and say, "My house is on fire," or something,
Mm-hmm.
and that gets routed to a firehouse, probably a volunteer firehouse, and someone will come and put out your fire. Well, depending on where you live in the U.S., the 911 agency that you call might be farther away than the next town over that has a fire truck that's closer.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
what they do is they aggregate all this data, so the different firehouses and agencies will coordinate with each other, and they'll send the best truck depending on the relative uh, proximity to a person's house. So it's a
Yeah.
really cool interface that they show. And so I got the call based off some articles I had written, and I was asked to come help with some of the performance. It was bogging down the machine that it was running SQL Server, and
Yep.
they were building web pages. It was ASP.NET and old ASP.NET. And yeah, the machine was crawling. It was trying to serve up a lot of data over and over and over again. Um, and we had done basically a full rewrite of the application, and we took it from 100% CPU utilization on the servers down to uh, like 0.5% CPU utilization. Like it
Wow.
wasn't to the point where we deployed it. I thought I broke it because it just wasn't doing any work.
Yeah.
So it was a massive performance increase. Still using SQL Server and stuff on the back end, but um, the funny thing was, we actually got a write up in one of their industry magazines that said that uh, there was a case where there was a emergency services came in. Someone was having like a cardiac arrest, and it flashes up on the screen. And so the medics get their gear on, they get in the truck. The truck goes out the drive because they're responding to the call that they see on the screen
Mm-hmm.
from our software. And it was a minute or two after they left the firehouse that the dispatcher finally came over and said, "Hey, need you to respond to a cardiac arrest, this address." And they
Yeah.
were already gone. They were off the door. Our software was faster than the dispatcher. And
There you go.
what I say is, just through technology and whatnot, we were able to dispatch emergency services faster than the emergency services could notify them. And
Exactly.
anyone who's ever themselves had an emergency, so cardiac arrest, a heart attack, trouble breathing, you know that seconds matter. And
Yeah.
here we gave them minutes. So the services were out the door faster. And I always call that like my favorite win I ever read
Yeah.
was software I wrote helped emergency services get to people that needed help faster than they were able to do before.
Mm-hmm.
And the crazy thing is, like, that database that was originally running on it was doing too much work. Like, to get back on the topic of silly things in databases, I didn't do it,
Yeah.
but the person who wrote the original version of the app, they had the database doing everything from like pulling latest information about, the state of incidents going on, but it was also doing color calculations. Like, all right, if this is a cardiac arrest, it should be this color. If it's a fire, it should be that color. It was doing all
Mm-hmm.
this logic. And that's stuff that the database is not really good at. It will do it, it just won't do it quickly.
Yeah.
And what we did was we removed all that logic. We just used the database for the thing it was good at, storing data and
Keeping it
querying
there.
data. And turns out when you do that, databases are really fast. And that was just one aspect of the entire application. But that's easily my favorite win. It's the one I always go to.
No, saving lives is always a good win. That adds a lot more value to what you do when you're working in tech. You can sometimes try to find just like what the larger purpose to a lot of the projects that you're working on, and you're like, man, this is silly. Or even in telecom, sometimes you're empowering people to do malicious activities. So when you do have like solid use cases, it's really fun to be passionate about some of those.
Yeah.
But on the database side, how do you feel as though they found themselves in that deep of a hole? Like, was really you think the largest problem just too much logic and using tools that weren't meant for what they were doing? I mean, 100% to 0.5% of CPU usage is uh, a little significant, to say the least. But was there like data storage or where you were kind of keeping those, or was it all still SQL based? Was there anything that like came out over the next couple of years that you were able to drop onto the table and really make that significant?
The the big thing we did remove a ton of logic from the database. So calculating what things should look like when they're rendered, like what color, we moved all that to our front end. So the old front end was all ASP.NET web forms for anyone who knows what that is, and
Mm-hmm.
it was the database would tell it make this box green, make that box blue, and we removed all that and we rewrote it with an Angular front end. So we would just send the data down. We get the data from the database and the data down to the client, and the client would figure out what color everything should be.
Yeah.
That's crazy fast. The the another big thing that we did was we implemented a decent caching layer. So not we used the database for persistence over a long term, but then we used like Redis server
Mm-hmm.
for caching. So anything that we need to pull um, regularly at a constant interval in real time, we'd usually hit our Redis server first, and then worst case, it would fall back to our SQL server. Um, that was a huge increase. The other big thing we did was instead of going to the server for every page refresh, we were using in .NET. We have a a protocol called SignalR, which basically is a WebSockets implementation. So we were
Mm-hmm.
using WebSockets very early in when WebSockets were fresh, brand spanking new. So we had
Mm-hmm.
WebSockets with a fallback to server send events, and then a fallback to long polling. But the important thing was we were only sending data. We weren't sending like the full page payload, and that was a huge performance increase by itself. So as we ramped up more and more users, our system didn't have to do anything. Like serving up the base like Angular application is really straightforward. You can cache all that, and then just sending the data, that is really fast and performant. And we didn't have to go to the SQL database every single time. So it's a
Yeah.
combination of things that made that application blazing fast. And I think in the long run, it's been performant because of those decisions. They brought on more agencies. They have more people signing up to use the dashboards that we create. And I think you asked an earlier question, but like, how do you kind of fall into that trap? But like,
Yeah.
how do you build a product like that? And I think
Yeah.
all developers have fallen into this trap of I wrote some code and it works. It does the thing I need to do. It works on my machine.
Oh
And
yeah.
what it doesn't survive is the test of scale. So it works fine on my machine when I'm sending a handful of requests to it to just see what it
Yeah.
does. That works great. Maybe it works great in the first couple of months just because a handful of people are using it. It doesn't have any real scale. But as things become popular, and as more and more people start using it, as the application has more and more data, you you can't really foresee what's it going to be like in 6 months or 6 years.
Oh yeah.
Eventually, it gets to the point where it's like, oh, maybe that decision I made 2 years ago was a bad decision, but I didn't know that at the time. I know that now because I have more information. And that's I think what happened to them. It worked great. It solved the problem. Like it wasn't a failure. It just didn't scale to the level that they needed to scale. So it was time to come in, reimagine how it was all going to work with the new information that we had. And
Yeah.
now we have a product that scales a little bit better. And like, I'm not going to sit here and say it was all sunshine and rainbows. Like, after a year or two, we hit another small wall and we had to go in and make some more adjustments to the system, because the thing that we thought would scaled better, but not as well as we needed to do. And we had to make some
Hmm.
changes. That's why
No,
it's called
definitely.
software, right? It's like software is designed to be soft. It's supposed to change.
Yeah.
So
No,
you
that's
can't just push it in production and leave it forever.
yeah, that's a funny way. I've never heard someone crack the joke in it with that light before. But you kind of mentioned just introducing new topics, to projects that have kind of been there for a little bit of time, and to kind of carry along that metaphor, as everyone and their cousins and mother love talking about AI. How
Yeah.
do you feel as though that has influenced just data structures, or maybe how you are able to implement that on like more of a day-to-day production level, or where do you really see how it has turned things upside down recently for you?
I think there's a couple ways to answer that question.
Yeah.
From a well, let's say from a developer standpoint, I think AI is going to make a competent developer faster. Um, I think it's going to make an incompetent developer dangerous. And those are some
Yeah,
harsh
true.
words. Uh,
Hmm.
I think it's going to make a non-developer extremely dangerous. And so that's from the person using AI to develop a product standpoint.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a whole nother discussion on its own. Then there's the discussion of putting AI into our products. And I think a lot of products are overdoing it. I think
Hmm.
there's definitely a time and place for AI in various products. Um, but I think there's this dash to just put AI everywhere, or say sprinkle some stuff on it and say, "Oh, we have AI,"
Exactly.
and it's going to lead it's going to lead to a lot of bad decisions. And I get a little bit excited because that's just future revenue for me, right? Because I get to come
Hmm.
and go, well, there's your problem, and it's usually going to be AI. The big clients I work for now, like, we use AI, but we use AI in very specific ways to answer very specific questions that
Hmm.
uh it's more, we're trying to replace a human to answer certain questions, but it's with a very strict rule set, and we're asking them very, like, yes or no questions, and like, nothing bad happens if they get it wrong. Like,
Yeah.
if the AI hallucinates a little and says no instead of yes, like, no one's going to die because of that, or no one's going to get charged thousands of dollars for it. It's just like,
Hmm.
oh, something shows up on the website, incorrectly, and
Yeah.
a human can always go fix that.
Humans make those errors all the time too. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what
Little
the AI is
things here.
training off of, right? Is
Hmm.
is humans. And if humans are wrong, how can we expect the AI to always be right?
Oh yeah. No, definitely. You touched on a good point of just it makes competent developers empowered, but it makes a lot of people dangerous who don't know the space as well. And I feel like I see that all the time, where it's just false confidence of like, hey, I got this thing, it works, I'm a sweet developer, all this is paid off. And it kind of comes to like the fickle ego of tech people, where you're like, all right, when my project works, I'm the king of the castle. And then when it doesn't work, I'm like, dude, what have I been spending my whole life on that I can't even do this simple thing? I think that part is pretty funny. And we definitely see a lot of projects that were developed with AI that are very successful, in terms of like application structure,
Yep.
start with just like vibe coding and then go from there. You can make it and you can get an end result. But at the end of the day, it definitely comes with a sense of false confidence that I think is going to be interesting to kind of see as, the next couple of years, when these companies are finding those, little edge cases where something will cause a 0 day and so and so company. But as you go to a lot of conferences, I'm sure you notice it's incredible how many companies have just kind of started or sprung up, because of this
Yeah.
insurgence. And I think that part is cool, that we'll see definitely a change of pace and landscape just based on the tools that we've been having so far.
It's very much AI. Like, I don't think you can be an AI company for the sake of being an AI company long term.
Yeah.
Like, you can't say we do this thing with AI, and I don't think those companies are going to last very long. Uh,
Hmm.
but what I think will last long are the companies that already solved the big problem, but then they're adding AI based features. Um, and so like uh I use the script a lot. I use Canva a lot. Like those are probably good example. Like they did they were functional in what they did before quote AI, right?
Yeah.
And then they came along and then they added AI features. So they still do the thing that they did very well and it's the
Hmm.
reason people use them. But now they have these extra set of features that are AI and they're added in an intelligent way that makes sense. So if you're getting the script to do video or audio editing, it's better now. If you're using
Yeah.
Canva to do image generation, it's better now. But if you were using an AI app because it was just image generation, like that's not going to last very long because it's going to get pulled into something else, and it's going to make something else better. Um,
Yeah.
it's-
And one thing that you mentioned was just giving it like a specific task, or like instructions, and really dialing in on that. And I think that is one of the biggest pieces in terms of how we're going to be able to get this to adopt at a larger scale. Because when you have people who are talking to these systems, or they're talking to an agent, and they're like, "Oh, tell me a joke." Well, this is for scheduling appointments at your doctor. Like,
yeah,
no, it's not going to be able to tell you a joke right now, and you're going to want to put barriers to not have that. But then people are like, "Oh, well, AI just isn't there. It's not able to do this one random little thing, where it can't be fantastic at everything." So one of the things that I kind of indoctrinate with one of the or all the projects that we implement with AI is giving it specific tasks and giving it a purpose, and then doing that really well.
yeah,
Do that better than the human was able to do. And in that regard, AI is kind of like a mirror, where it's like, if you don't know how to talk to it well, it's going
yeah.
to give you gibberish back. But if you are able to use those tools and structures, then it'll bounce back pretty well. But it is definitely crazy how every couple months you realize, man, this is a lot different than when we were taking computer science classes in college and we had to write on pen and paper for our exams. And now they're able to query all of the database for the developer documentation for a specific company, and generate interesting code based on that. So
There's There was a point in my early career where I worked in an office and I had bookcases full of books. And if I needed
mhm.
to know anything, I'd go pull a book off the bookshelf. And they were great reference guides. Like, all right, I forgot how to do X, Y, and Z, and I would flip to it, and it was there. And that was like Google. Like Google was obviously a thing. We used Google, but there was just not enough online to really have like the full scope of the knowledge that we needed. We still used books a lot. And now the books are gone. Like all the books are online.
Oh
And then it
yeah.
was just Google to find the information and things like Stack Overflow to find what we needed to know. And now it's all AI. I don't even go to Google anymore. I'll go to
Hmm.
ChatGPT before I go to Google. And it's so good. Like it's really good.
Hmm.
And it's better today than it was 6 months ago. And if we went back a year or so. Like I remember having this conversation a year and a half ago where like ChatGPT was new, and we're like, "Oh, this is amazing! It does the searches for me," and now it's kind of everyone's go-to, and it's just going to continue to get better. But I need to remind when I talk AI with other developers, I tell them like Claude's favorite thing to say is, "You're right," because the number of times I have to point out that it's wrong. And like it has the full context of my projects, my applications. It has the full context of anything it can search on the internet, but then it comes
Mm-hmm.
back with the incorrect result, like 80% of the time. And I have to correct it. And there's nothing wrong with correcting the AI. Like I treat it like I would if I had a junior developer working for me. But like, oh,
Yep.
that's good, but that's wrong. We have to we have to make some adjustments. But I'm
Yeah.
doing that over and over and over again. And Claude's really famous for like circular. I don't know what the phrase for it is. There should be a phrase. It's like circular incompetence, where it introduces an issue, it fixes its issue incorrectly, fixes its issue incorrectly again, so on, until it eventually comes back to its original incorrect answer. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where the like you just have to be a competent developer to look at what it's doing and go, this was your mistake. And it would go,
Yeah.
you're right. I did make a mistake. And it fixes his mistake. And eventually you can get to the result that you want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like I'm not sure if it's made me faster. Like I've
Oh yeah.
like there used to be a time I used to know a lot of stuff. Like I used to be a really smart guy. Like I could just regurgitate like syntax and
Yeah.
algorithms and stuff off the top of my head. And Google helped eliminate a lot of that. I think AI is helping eliminate whatever other brain cells I had, because
Mm-hmm.
I think if you ask me any intro level interview question right now, I go, I don't know,
Yeah.
no idea.
No, it
Um,
is really funny. I am so rusty and out of practice, and I noticed that when I'm just like writing a console.log and like 4 or 5 different programming languages, as I
yeah,
am, and I'm like, oh, this just simple print statement, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even get the syntax right. I'm like, oh, what I learned the first day, just because you don't need to anymore, and kind of learning those skills or going across it. It was just interesting you mentioning taking the computer science classes, and learning the in and outs of, some of these systems, or really just technical concepts where you get to the math behind everything so down.
yeah,
And now you just tell something, yeah, you just vibe code it, you vibe coding versus what your CS, professor was teaching you in your 400 level classes are very different approaches that have kind of surfaced. But the skill is the skill, and at the end of the day you just gotta find what works out best for you. And I find myself in that tunnel way too often, where I think that this will help solve my problem, and then I'm like, if I just did it, I would have saved myself so much more time. Cutting
yeah.
corners is actually not cutting corners by any means sometimes when it comes to those. But my last question is just, what question have I not asked you? What do you have going on? I know you mentioned you have a talk coming up. What else you have? What's on your plate these days?
Let's see. I have a couple conferences coming up later this year. I'm speaking at the Commit Your Code conference in Dallas, Texas. That's it's all charity, so any money earned from that conference is charity. But that's good if you're web developer, cloud developer, .NET, Java, everything in between. It's a great conference. They're in their second year. Um, Later this year, I'm also going to be at the Tech Bash conference in November. I'm actually keynoting as the president of the .NET Foundation, so talking about open source and the .NET ecosystem. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a I'm also speaking at the DevUp conference in St. Louis, Missouri. I think that's in August. I've lost track of time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about uh, application stability. So how do you build and architect a stable application that will live long term? Kind of what we were talking about earlier is like, how do you build something that will
Yeah.
scale and not crash after 10 people start using it?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's all I have on my plate at the moment. I'm always open for conferences. So if anyone out there
Yeah.
needs speakers for a conference, tell them to hit me up.
Yeah, I'm gonna add you as well. ClueCon in Chicago in August, so I will see you there, and I'm already putting your name down for speaking. Okay, so hopefully you have
Already.
everything ready and prepped. But Kevin, great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you around the space.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.